Robert entered the office and tossed an envelope with money onto the table. His mood was as bad as it could be that day. His head ached from lack of sleep, and his lower back throbbed like that of a centenarian. Maybe Helen was right? He is an old man. These thoughts made it even worse. Thomas, his partner, added fuel to the fire by grabbing the envelope from the table and examining it. Some skinny envelope, he muttered, carefully feeling the paper. 5,000 or 10? Definitely 10. I have a nose for these things. I can tell how much they gave without looking. And did you get a lot last time? Robert inquired, glancing at him sideways. $0. You know I don't take bribes, his friend replied. And it looks like they didn't treat you generously either. Where did such wealth come from? From the accounting department, Robert answered. I'm heading out on a raid today. To the highway? Thomas clarified. Where else? Replied Robert. They have it easy there. He sat down and started massaging his temples. The headache was getting worse. And you don't seem happy, Thomas observed. Afraid the love priestesses will scratch your face? Just like William last month. I think the scars are still there. Swore off raids, blaming everything on others. Yeah, I'm not afraid, Robert muttered. Scratches are nothing. Can't I handle the girls? It's just that Mark got sick again, cried all night. Well, and I, accordingly, didn't sleep either. Had to get up, rock him. Amanda is already worn out, and now this. We'll take the girls now, talk to them, and the usual plot will start, complaints about a miserable life, indignation. And you're asking for a bank robbery. Thomas chuckled. It's our usual routine. Why are you nitpicking? Robert shrugged. He already regretted starting this conversation. Tired of listening to all these complaints, he said, as if he were some kind of psychologist. It's not my business how they ended up in such a life. Thinking about Helen, his partner asked insightfully. Wondering where she disappeared to? Yeah, what does she have to do with it? Robert protested. I haven't thought about Helen at all. And that's a lie, Thomas calmly replied. I may not be good at much, but I can distinguish lies. 20 years in the police, not for nothing. And it would be strange if you weren't thinking about Helen. Any normal father worries about his daughter. Then I must be abnormal, grumbled Robert, getting up from the chair. I'll go change, I guess. Can't catch night butterflies in this outfit, can I? Why not give it a try? His friend responded cheerfully. Maybe they'll give you a discount. Robert chastised himself for telling Thomas that he supposedly doesn't think about Helen. Of course, it was a lie. Thoughts of his daughter never left his mind, day or night, for the past year. The image of Helen often appeared to him in nightmares. Through his work, Robert had seen many horrors, and now his subconscious made his own daughter a participant in those stories. He was partly relieved that taking care of his little son distracted him from sleep, but the guilt was not easy to suppress. It greeted Robert every day, replacing the nightmares. Yes, those sympathetic glances from colleagues. Robert felt like they were discussing him behind his back, considering him something like a cobbler without shoes. A policeman who couldn't find his own daughter. It irritated him immensely. Actually, Robert was twisting his soul when he said he was tired of listening to the pitiful stories of street girls. The girls often cursed fate, complained about alcoholic parents who led them to such a life. It was gratifying for Robert to know that he wasn't the greatest evil in this world. Not the spawn of hell that Helen considered him. Yet, going on a raid that evening was beyond his strength. His head was pulsating painfully. David, sitting next to him, didn't look too pleased either. My mom won't survive if she finds out what I'm doing, he muttered. What are you planning to do? Robert asked. Consider it just a routine procurement. Buying drugs or weapons, for example. Yeah, my mom would understand all that, but not girls of easy virtue, David continued to grumble. I don't like it. Stop grumbling, Robert admonished him. You won't escape from this Stephen business anyway. Put on a smile, otherwise, the night beauties will think the wrong things about you. Right now, you look like you want to bury them deeper into the ground. David forced a smile on his face, more resembling a predatory grin. Robert sighed heavily. At least that. Okay, I'll do the talking, and you try not to mess things up. You'll have time to confess your sins to your mother later, modest one. And the two girls standing on the roadside, night butterflies, were easily discernible. It was evident at first glance. Any checks were just a formality, completely unnecessary from Robert's perspective. High heels were acceptable, women could endure much for the sake of beauty. But vulgar fishnet stockings, short skirts, especially when it was freezing outside, sent shivers down Robert's spine at the sight of these outfits. How long do you have to stand on the street to get frostbite? 10 minutes? Half an hour? The man sighed and pressed the gas, slowly driving towards them. The girls turned around and stared at him questioningly. One of them looked around 30, a seasoned girl with a bold gaze and a nose piercing. The other was much younger, probably just out of high school. The young face, smeared with makeup, looked unattractive and pitiful. Robert's heart squeezed at the sight of her. This girl was probably the same age as his daughter Helen. Regaining his composure, he leaned out of the window and asked, "How much?" "5, handsome," the older girl grinned. "Not a ruble less." "Will there be a discount for 2?" David joined the conversation. Robert looked at him in surprise. He didn't expect the guy to speak up. Apparently, his younger partner temporarily set aside worries about his mother and fully devoted himself to the profession. "Discounts, my dear, are on the market, and here, everything is by the book, honestly." "So, cough it up," Robert smiled, addressing his friend. "I won't be paying for you." The girl took the money from his hands and smiled. She wanted to say something, but Robert pulled out his badge and showed it to her. "And now, I think we can talk." The young priestess of love squealed and tried to run away, but Thomas, who appeared out of nowhere, blocked her path. David grabbed the second girl. She cursed up a storm, but Robert nodded to his partners. "Load them, we'll talk in the precinct." When they returned to the precinct, Robert asked David, "Will you take the young one?" The guy nodded. "Are you sure?" Robert asked. "If you want, hand her over to Thomas. He has a lot of experience in these matters." "I'll manage," grumbled David. "Am I too small or something?" Consciously, Robert didn't offer the young guy the second girl who had been showering them with insults throughout the journey. He was afraid that David wouldn't handle it. The guy had been in the department for 2 years, and service hadn't tempered him yet. If anyone should talk to such individuals, it was Robert, who had seen all sorts of things during his service and, in some cases, had become the cause. The dark-haired girl completely justified Robert's concerns. She slouched on the chair as if she were at home and shot him impudent glances. "Last name, first name, patronymic?" Robert said, preparing for a difficult conversation. "Amanda," the girl answered, looking at him with disdain. "Don't expect me to say it's nice to meet you. You won't hear it from me." "No need for that," reassured Robert, praising himself again for his foresight. If David were in his place, he would probably have started to upset her and said a lot of unnecessary things. Who needs that? Do you provide intimate services? He asked just for formality, because it was already clear. For you? Never in my life, the girl replied. Gild me if you want. She leaned slightly and elegantly threw her jacket off with a gesture that emphasized her availability, so to speak. More accurately, unavailability. Look, this is something you'll never have. And indeed, Robert stared at the girl. Not at her chest, probably size 5, which somehow squeezed into a tight tank top. A pendant hanging over the top. Where did you get this? Robert asked with a lowered voice. What? The girl didn't understand. Robert reached out and grabbed the pendant. Amanda recoiled. Easy there. It's private property. You have no right to touch it. This is not private property, Robert countered. Because the pendant doesn't belong to you. Why not? The girl asked. My boyfriend gave it to me. This pendant belonged to a person who is officially missing. Robert barked. And I will get information from you about where you got it. Robert was beside himself with anger, surprising even himself. Well, nothing surprising. Blatant lies would throw anyone off course because the man knew for sure that this pendant existed in the world in a single copy. Robert had ordered it for his wife many years ago. Robert met Karen when he had just started working in the police. It was a day off, and it turned out to be for the better. The man had already realized that the police uniform didn't contribute to successful acquaintances. What girl would want to go out with him as if under escort? Most of them, on the contrary, averted their eyes, afraid of getting into trouble. In civilian clothes, Robert felt comfortable and free, and sometimes like an undercover agent. Like this time when he caught an old lady at the market almost crying in front of a plump vegetable seller. You've overcharged me. Overcharged me by a whole half kilo, she lamented. I double-checked everything at home, even borrowed scales from my neighbor. You have no conscience cheating old people. Do you know what my pension is? What happened, Grandma? Robert asked, approaching. The old lady showed him a bag of cucumbers. She says there's 1.5 kilograms here. How is that possible? Even by eye, it's clear that it's less. It's obvious, Robert confirmed, weighing the bag in his hands to be sure. So, she laid out some of the cucumbers at home and came back, the saleswoman grumbled. A senile old woman. Please return the money to the woman, Robert politely requested. The saleswoman stared at him indignantly. Why on earth should I? Return it. Robert repeated, pulling out his identification for emphasis. The saleswoman clearly wanted to continue the conversation, but something in Robert's serious gaze made her think twice. Here you go, she grumbled, handing the old lady a handful of change. They buy the goods, eat them, and then make up all sorts of things. They stepped away from the counter, and the old lady rushed to thank Robert. Thank you. Thank you. There's no end to these swindlers. They fleece us to the bone. Robert smiled. You're welcome. I'm glad I was nearby and could help you. Overflowing with gratitude, the old lady insisted on giving him a few cucumbers, which Robert persistently declined. I don't want to hear anything, the woman shook her head. You helped me, so take it, it's your reward. Robert walked away, ironically thinking that, unintentionally, he received his first bribe. Who would have thought it would be in the form of cucumbers? He took 1 kilogram of apples and headed for the exit. A girl in front of him had such huge bags that it seemed amazing how such a fragile stranger could handle such weight. Robert caught up with her and grabbed one of the bags. Let me help you. Oh my God, the girl recoiled. You scared me. I'm sorry, said Robert. Did you think I was a robber? I just wanted to help. You look terribly burdened. Let me carry your bags. I don't even know, the girl mumbled. It's inconvenient to burden others with my problems. It's not a problem for me, he reassured her. Besides, we're going the same way. By the way, which way is your house? You don't even know where I live, but you say we're going the same way, the girl laughed. Okay, let's go. And thank you very much. The girl's bags, judging by the sensations, were filled with bricks. Robert took both and shook his head. How do you carry such weight? I got used to it, the girl said. Someone has to do it, right? Don't you have a father or brother for this? Robert asked. The stranger gave him a sly look. Is this a clever trick to find out if I'm married or not? No, I didn't mean anything like that, the guy stammered. Don't be offended, I'm joking, the girl smiled. It's good that you just asked without any intrigue or cunning. I can't stand that. Fortunately, the stranger lived very close to the market. Robert couldn't imagine how much time it would take to walk with such a load, the handles of the bags mercilessly cut into his fingers. The girl entered the entrance, and he followed. From somewhere above, a noise was heard. Someone was banging on the iron door with their feet. Your neighbors seem rowdy, Robert remarked. The girl absent-mindedly nodded, her face turning as white as a sheet. What's wrong? Robert worried. Are you not feeling well? No. Everything's fine, she mumbled. Don't pay attention, I'm okay. It began to dawn on Robert that something was wrong. The person breaking down the door on the upper floor was definitely not just a drunkard. He had some significance for the stranger. Let's go see who's there, Robert said and started climbing the stairs. Don't go, please, the girl said fearfully. Why? Robert didn't understand. Are you okay? No. Everything's fine, she whispered. Please don't go. Until Robert reached the top floor, he wasn't sure what he would find. The sound of someone banging on the door with their feet was getting louder. When they reached the 5th floor, a short man, resembling a gorilla, was standing near one of the doors. He was systematically pounding on it. Karen, open up, your fiancé is here, he whined and accompanied this phrase with another blow. Robert looked at the girl. Which door is yours? The stranger pointed to the drunken man. Robert clarified. So, you're Karen? Yes, the girl nodded. I'm Robert, the guy smiled. Let's consider our acquaintance complete. Robert left the bag by the window and went up to the drunkard, patting him on the shoulder. Buddy, don't you want to talk like a man? Maybe you're only good at bothering girls? The drunk turned around and stared at him with a murky, dull gaze. Nobody asked you. He grumbled. Get out of here. Then he noticed Karen standing by the window. Oh, Karen is here. And I thought you were at home. I've been banging on the door like a fool for an hour. He started to go towards the girl, but Robert stopped him. Leave him alone. And what's it to you? For you, nothing good, Robert promised him. The stranger swung to hit him, but the guy intercepted the drunkard's hand and twisted it behind his back. Do you understand when it's done nicely? He led him past the frightened girl and released him only on the 3rd floor. The man cursed tirelessly all the way, and when he found himself free, he started showering threats. You're a dead man. Got it? You'll regret being born. Thinking of messing with Karen? I'll show you. Robert shook his head. No, I'll show you something. He pulled out an ID from his pocket, opened it, and showed it to the man. Understood? For the last time, forget your way here. If I see you here again, I'll make your life miserable. You got it. Your imagination seems to be working well. The man nodded with hatred. Understood, not a fool. But Karen is a fool. Got mixed up with a cop. Continuing to grumble to himself, he started descending the stairs. He tripped on one of the steps, tumbled down to the very bottom, but then straightened up again and walked away, swaying slightly. Robert returned to Karen, who was visibly shaken. Are you okay? The girl asked fearfully. Did Donald do anything to you? He didn't have the chance, Robert smiled. We didn't fight, just talked. Talked? The girl asked incredulously. I think Donald forgot how to talk about 5 years ago. When he's really drunk, he mumbles, and when he's completely sober, he swears. Don, you say? Robert clarified. Do you know him well? Unfortunately, yes, Karen frowned. We went to school together. Back then, it was all just a joke. He had a crush on me and made silly jokes. I didn't pay attention, thought it wasn't serious. But after school, Donald, as they say, took the wrong path. Got involved with some drunks, started stealing, did 3 years. And now, since he got out, he doesn't leave me alone, imagining that we have a great love. Sometimes he comes and knocks on the door. Like today, you saw it yourself. Well, that's quite a story, Robert commented. But don't worry, I explained everything to Donald. He won't bother you anymore. Karen shook her head. It's hard to believe. Oh, you'll see, Robert assured her. But if he bothers you again, call me, and I'll handle it. Karen smiled. What a mysterious stranger I've encountered. First, he helps me carry heavy bags from the store, then he defends me from a hooligan. That's me. Robert grinned. And very modest too, so don't praise me too soon. By the way, I still haven't brought you those bags. Show me where to put them. The girl led him into the apartment and asked, Would you like some tea? I'm still shaking, I can't calm down. Sure, I'll have a cup, nodded Robert. But you're shaking unnecessarily. I already told you everything will be fine. The atmosphere in the apartment was quite modest, an old carpet on the wall, worn-out wallpaper, chipped tiles in the kitchen. Roberts experienced and noticed a leaking faucet and a crooked door in a cupboard. Do you have any tools? He asked. I could fix all this right now. It's not a big deal for me. Oh, no. Karen waved her hands. We'll fix it ourselves. Dad will have time on the weekend, and he'll fix it. So, you do live with your father after all? Robert clarified. Why hasn't he dealt with your admirer earlier? Yeah, who can Dad deal with? Sadly replied the girl. He's already old, and not in the best health. Donald would knock him down with one blow. Later, when Robert started dating Karen, he had the chance to meet this person. Of course, the girl greatly distorted her father's image, describing him as weak and frail. If he was suffering from anything, it was alcoholism. Christopher's diagnosis was the same as Donald's. The man barely held onto his job, guarding some warehouses, and spent all weekends in front of the TV with a bottle of spirits. While Karen's mother was alive, Christopher managed somehow, but after her death, he spiraled into all kinds of troubles. Robert couldn't imagine how she endured it all, a perpetually drunken father and an obsessive suitor. They dated for 6 months before deciding to get married. Karen worked as a preschool teacher, a quiet and modest girl. She didn't want to live in a common law marriage, and Robert wasn't sure he was ready to go to the registry office. But fate left him no choice. The final straw for Robert was the incident when Christopher raised his hand to his daughter. "Where did you get that bruise?" he asked with indignation when Karen came for a date. The girl looked away. "Just bumped into something, don't pay attention." "Bumped into something?" Robert asked indignantly. "Save those explanations for your preschoolers. Maybe they'll believe it." "Did your father do this?" Karen shyly nodded. "We had a little argument, and he couldn't control himself." "Argument?" scoffed Robert. "Tell it straight. You were trying once again to take the bottle away from him." Karen didn't say anything, and her silence told everything better than words. Robert sighed. "We need to do something about this. It can't go on like this." The girl looked at him in fear. "What can be done?" "Don't tell me you're planning to." "I won't do anything to your father," Robert reassured Karen. "Did you think I seriously considered hanging some charge on him and sending him to jail for 20 years? No, of course not. I just want to suggest that we get married, offer you my hand and heart, so to speak. I understand that now is not the most suitable moment, and our mood is not the brightest, but I don't want to postpone this any longer." Tears streamed down Karen's cheeks. "Do you really want us to be together?" she asked, sniffing. "Or do you just pity me?" "I really want us to be together," Robert answered honestly. He did it not out of pity. This girl just became very dear to him. They celebrated the wedding simply, no feasts and drinking. Karen was too tired of all that in everyday life to witness drunks at her own celebration. They invited only a few people, their closest friends. They sang songs with a guitar. The newlywed settled in Robert's place, and he didn't want to hear about maintaining any relationship with Christopher. Karen agreed, realizing the futility of trying to wean her father from alcohol. They drifted apart and essentially became strangers. "I don't know how my father and I ended up like this," sighed Karen. "He used to be so kind, did lessons with me. I remember in the 90s, he got me this wonderful jacket. Beautiful, the kind I could only dream of. He spent his vouchers on it. In high school, he practically escorted me home, always worried that something might happen. But when my mother died, he became a completely different person. He even stopped asking how I was doing. The TV and the bottle became more important than family." "And is family the most important thing in your life?" Robert inquired. "Exactly," Karen nodded. "I want us to have many children, at least 3. Don't you want that?" Robert shrugged. "I don't know. I love you, and that's enough for me. The rest is up to fate." Helen was born 2 years into their marriage, and Robert didn't expect to be so happy. Only with the arrival of their daughter did he understand that Karen was right. Children are indeed the most important thing in life. His wife also lit up and hummed all day long. It was then that the idea came to Robert to give Karen a golden pendant in the shape of a peculiar flower. Karen loved flowers, and initially, he often gave her bouquets, but then his wife started objecting. "No need, really," she affectionately said. "I love flowers, but they should grow in flower beds or gardens, delight everyone with their beauty. Cut bouquets that wither in a few days, I don't understand that. Beauty should live long, there's no need to destroy it." So the thought occurred to Robert to give Karen a golden flower. Of course, the custom-made precious piece cost him a bunch of money, but he had no regrets. The delight, surprise, shocked, the whole range of emotions reflected on his wife's face when he presented her with his gift was worth it. Karen was happy, and Robert was even happier because he finally managed to make his wife happy. Karen wore the pendant without taking it off. It was on her that night when the tragedy happened. Robert had no idea that Karen had any relatives other than Christopher until she herself revealed it. Nancy passed away, she announced one evening when Robert returned home from work. It's so sad. I haven't seen her in 100 years. I always wanted to visit her, but it never happened. First, I dealt with my father, then pregnancy, and Helen was born. Wait. Robert interrupted her. Who's Nancy? You never told me about her. Karen shrugged. Because there was nothing to tell. I saw her only a couple of times, and that was in my childhood. She was my mom's aunt. I don't even know what to call our relationship. She lived in a remote village in the neighboring region. I tried many times to establish contact with her, wrote her some letters, but beyond mutual holiday greetings, we didn't progress. Maybe Nancy wasn't interested in all that. And now she's gone, and we can't meet for sure. How I regret not meeting her earlier. Karen looked so unhappy that Robert felt it his duty to express his assumption. What if we go to her funeral? You can say everything you wanted at her grave. I heard that it eases the soul. And why blame yourself if your aunt didn't want to communicate with you? It happened, that's life. Sometimes strangers become closer than those who share the same blood. Maybe you're right, Karen nodded. I would really like to go and say goodbye to Auntie. But how will we do it? Who will take care of Helen? Taking the little one on such a long trip doesn't seem right. Well, let's ask for help from another aunt, Robert suggested. My Aunt Dorothy loves Helen. Do you think she'll refuse to look after our daughter for a couple of days? No, she might not want to give her back later. She'll get attached to Helen. The old lady was indeed delighted to help the young couple. Upon hearing what they were asking for, Dorothy beamed with a smile. Of course, she assured Karen. I'll take care of your little one. Go and don't worry about anything. Haven't I raised children before? I remember how she looked after me when my mother was on a business trip, Robert whispered to his wife. By the time we return, Helen will have gained a couple of kilograms for sure. Don't doubt it. Robert fully approved of Karen's desire to say goodbye to her relative and even found it quite natural. However, when the trip began, he regretted it very much. It was November, the most unpleasant month of the year. The rain was incessant, and the desolate rural landscapes induced melancholy. It got even worse at the cemetery. After the mournful speech of the priest, it seemed to Robert that they were not burying Nancy but himself. His soul felt so wretched. He barely endured the rural memorial, and he said to his wife, "Let's get out of here. I can't stand another day in this place. It's so gray and depressing." And Karen didn't object. Some inexplicable oppressive feeling weighed on her too. She continued to reproach herself for not doing enough, not being kind enough to her aunt. "Let's get on the road, go faster," Robert smiled, reassuring his wife as they trudged along the broken rural road. "Don't be upset, we'll be in the city very soon." "I'm not worried," Karen shook her head. "I just miss Helen, but she's fine. I called Dorothy this morning. They've already become inseparable. They're like two peas in a pod." The car merged onto the highway, and Robert finally increased the speed. "Now everything's in order," he smiled at his wife. "In about 5 hours, we'll be home, and maybe we'll pick up Helen if Aunt Dorothy isn't already asleep." Karen absent-mindedly nodded, thinking about something of her own. This is how Robert remembered her, mysterious, staring into the darkness of the window, looking somewhere through time. It seemed that at that moment, she was no longer with him. She was going to meet her aunt to finally ask for forgiveness. The car was hit by a terrible blow. Robert didn't remember anything else. Later, he blamed himself for what happened. Yes, investigators said that the driver of the truck that crashed into them was drunk, that he was speeding. But Robert himself was no better. He drove the car like it was on fire. He blamed himself for everything that happened, for Karen's absence. The impact came from the side where she was sitting. She died on the spot before the ambulance arrived, and Robert wanted to believe that she didn't suffer. He, on the other hand, escaped with just a couple of fractures, even though he wished for the harshest punishment for himself. Lying in the hospital bed, Robert blamed himself for turning from a policeman into a murderer. He found no forgiveness and desperately wanted to follow his wife. Only one thing held Robert back: his daughter. Someone had to raise her, set her on her feet. There were no other candidates, besides the drunken Christopher and the old Dorothy. So, it was up to him personally to take care of it. Thoughts of death had to be postponed indefinitely. Robert clenched his teeth and followed all the doctor's instructions to recover as quickly as possible. When he was discharged and came to Dorothy's house to take Helen home, his daughter burst into tears. A little later, remembering that moment, Robert thought that his daughter's tears could be considered a sign nothing would be the same as before. Karen was no longer by their side, and he couldn't handle the child on his own. Thanks to Dorothy, the old lady volunteered to help him. So, Robert was able to return to work fairly soon. Contrary to expectations, his colleagues did not treat him as a criminal. Thomas asked sympathetically, "How are you holding up?" "I'm trying," Robert said. "That's why I rushed back to work. I want to immerse myself in my job and forget about everything." "In that case, you've come to the right place," Thomas nodded. "While you chase after junkies and drunks, you'll forget your own name. Just don't drink yourself. Otherwise, you'll spiral down, and we won't catch you." Thomas didn't really need to say that. If Robert ever felt the urge to drink, it immediately vanished when he remembered the test and Karen's former suitor. Alcoholics disgusted Robert, and he had no intention of becoming one of them, especially with Helen to take care of. The first 10 years of their life were more or less normal. Aunt Dorothy filled the role of mother for the girl, seeing her off to school, braiding her hair. Robert played the provider in the family, unfortunately communicating little with his daughter. After a particularly challenging day at work, he often wasn't in the mood and didn't want to dump his feelings on his daughter. He had dinner alone, listening to his daughter playing dolls with Dorothy. Occasionally, they went somewhere, but such occasions could be counted on one hand. The trip to the zoo was particularly memorable for Robert. Contrary to expectations, the outing left a depressing impression on Helen. She walked past the enclosures, sadly observing the animals. Upon returning home, she asked her father, "Dad, can't you free the little animals? Since you manage the cages, you must have the keys." "What cages?" Robert didn't understand. "Charles said you grab people on the streets and put them behind bars," the girl explained. "And probably animals too?" "Release them, Dad, please. I promise never to be capricious again." Robert gritted his teeth. All these years, his father-in-law had been his headache. Christopher never complained about his son-in-law for taking Karen away from the family, and after her death, he completely lost his restraint. Initially, he would come to his house and create scenes, well aware that Robert would let him off the hook in memory of his wife. Then he changed tactics and began telling Helen all sorts of nasty things about him. Somewhat minor, in an affectionate tone, but all of this accumulated in the girl's memory and was bound to lead to an explosion sooner or later. It happened after Dorothy's funeral. The old lady died at the age of 85, a quite respectable age that neither her husband nor any of her friends reached. Yes, she lived thanks to Helen in many ways. The girl was the only meaning of her life. When Dorothy passed away, Helen was 14, and she was deeply affected. "How will we manage now, Dad?" she asked, wiping away tears again and again. "We'll manage somehow," Robert muttered, even though Dorothy's death was a terrible blow for him as well. "Don't cry, Helen. Remember that Aunt Dorothy never cried herself and didn't like tears. Now she's watching us from the other side, and she'd be upset. Try to smile, at least for her." His daughter shook her head. "You're asking for the impossible, Dad. Smile on a day like this?" "Yes, it's easier to enroll in a physics and math program after school than to force oneself to be happy on the day of the funeral of my beloved Dorothy. It's something on the verge of fantasy." Christopher also attended the memorial service, although Dorothy couldn't stand him during her lifetime, and they barely interacted. There was no doubt that only alcohol brought him to the memorial. Robert tried to keep an eye on him, fearing that his father-in-law wouldn't pull some stunt. But everything went more or less smoothly, at least until the guests dispersed. "We need to leave," Robert told him. "We booked this hall until 3 o'clock. They'll ask us to leave soon." "They'll ask, and we'll answer," Christopher lazily replied, knocking back another shot of vodka. "Indeed, Grandpa," Helen pleaded. "Enough for you already. Let's go from here." With age, she increasingly resembled her mother, and it hurt Robert to think that once Karen herself had pleaded with her father to stop. And where did it lead? To the beatings that the kind daddy handed out right and left? "Don't get too close to him, daughter," Robert said, looking unfriendly at his father-in-law. "Grandpa doesn't take responsibility for himself when he's drunk. He'll beat you and not even notice. Isn't that right, Christopher?" Robert had no intention of causing a scene, but the self-satisfied expression frozen on his father-in-law's face infuriated him. Wasn't this the man who ruined Karen's entire youth, and now he's approaching the granddaughter? Trying to sow discord in their family. Christopher looked at him and smirked. "You can't do much when you're drunk, I admit. Just to be clear, I never killed anyone. Gave a paternal smack, sure, but no one ever died from that." Helen looked at her father with confusion. "What is he talking about, Dad?" Tell her, Christopher prodded Robert. "Don't want to? Then I'll tell her. Helen, you're old enough to know the truth. Your dad killed your mom. That's the short version. For more details, he'll tell you himself. Right, Robert? Sorry, Citizen Chief." Robert felt like he was running out of air. He wasn't prepared for such a turn of events that day. "What does Grandpa mean?" The girl frowned. "Dad, you said Mom died in an accident?" "In an accident," confirmed Christopher. "But your daddy was behind the wheel. Had a few drinks at some lady's wake and sped down the road like a maniac." "I wasn't drinking," mumbled Robert. "But you were speeding," insisted the father-in-law. From that day on, their lives turned into a nightmare. Helen couldn't believe what she heard for a long time. She repeatedly asked her father if it was true. What could he say to his daughter's questions? Lie? Say that Christopher's words were untrue? Robert didn't want to deceive his daughter. Suspicion took root in Helen's heart, and sooner or later, she had to uncover the truth. So, Robert just nodded and said the first thing that came to mind, a childish excuse. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to." Since then, Helen hated him. She was already becoming defiant due to the influence of teenage hormones, and after her grandfather's story about the accident, she crossed all boundaries. "You're not my father," she declared to Robert the day after the ill-fated wake. "Not just because you caused Mom's death. You're also a liar. All these years, you've hidden your sins from me. I hate you." She said those last words absolutely sincerely. At least, Robert believed her immediately. One couldn't flash such angry eyes without wishing death upon someone. The little girl who used to throw herself into his arms upon meeting disappeared. In her place emerged a malicious fury. Helen started coming home late, not telling her father where she had been. Instead of answering, she just slammed the door, skipped lessons, and insulted him on any pretext. Robert was amazed. Where did so much bitterness come from? Now he really wanted to drink. More than before, when he lost Karen. The loss of his daughter had a greater impact on him than his wife's death. Helen was here, so close, yet impossible to reach. One evening after work, Robert couldn't resist and stopped by a bar. He ordered whiskey and stared at the glass for a long time, imagining drowning his sorrows in it. Then he drank, ordered more. He left the bar slightly tipsy, but still got behind the wheel. Robert's house was just a couple of blocks away, so he wasn't afraid of getting into an accident. And if he crashed into a pole, his daughter would rejoice at his death. Why worry? Fortunately, Robert didn't have the habit of turning on the radio while driving, otherwise, he would have never noticed the tragedy unfolding on the sidewalk. "Get away from me," a female voice cried out, a strange mix of determination and despair. Robert slowed down near the sidewalk and took a closer look. A couple was struggling about 10 meters away from him, near a newspaper kiosk closed for the night. The man and the woman were fighting over a lady's handbag. Robert approached them. "What's going on here?" he asked in the sternest voice he could muster. The robber caught sight of him and made a run for it. Robert only had time to notice that he wasn't the thug he initially thought, but rather a skinny boy, almost a teenager. Robert approached the woman and picked up the fallen purse from the ground. The stranger nodded gratefully. "Thank you so much. I thought I'd end up with just a strap in my hands." "And where are the parents looking?" mumbled Robert, suddenly remembering Helen. "Exactly," nodded the stranger. "If I were his mother, I don't know what I would do with such a son. And I won't dare to report it to the police. I'd ruin his entire life." "If you want, you can complain to me," Robert offered. "I'm sort of a policeman, just off duty. I provide free consultations after work and come to the aid of those in need, naturally." The woman chuckled. "Is that so? Then I'm lucky. The police came to my rescue, even though I didn't call them. Thank you so much. Shall I escort you?" Robert asked out of politeness. The woman nodded. "You know, I won't refuse. After what happened, I feel a bit uneasy. I simply can't endure another encounter with another thug." Robert locked his car, and they walked slowly along the sidewalk. A sense of déjà vu overcame the man. This was how he met Karen, defending her from a pursuer. "Where are you coming from so late?" Robert asked to keep the conversation going. "From work," the woman replied. "I got jobs at 2 different places just to be home less often." "Why? Is it boring alone, or do neighbors bother you?" "Not the neighbors, but the emptiness," the stranger answered after a slight pause. "Since my husband passed away, I've been constantly alone. I don't have children, my friends have their own families, so I work hard to occupy myself." Emptiness. All of this was familiar to Robert. Essentially, he had nothing either, only work. Helen had long turned into a severed piece. Or no, on the contrary, Robert himself became the severed piece when his daughter crossed him out of her life. The next evening, he decided to follow this woman. He ambushed her in the same place he met her the day before and trailed behind her. It seemed inconspicuous and quiet, but the woman still noticed him. "What's this?" she asked, turning around. "Are you trying to interrogate me, or are you just concerned about my safety?" "In that case, thank you, I'm deeply touched." Robert shook his head, "Neither. I just wanted to ask, what's your name?" The woman smiled, "Amanda." "And you?" At first, Robert didn't think their acquaintance would lead to anything serious. He just wanted to talk to someone who would understand him, to pour out his soul to Amanda. However, with each new encounter, Robert felt that he was getting more entangled. Helen laughed at him. "Where do you go in the evenings, Daddy?" Acting like the morality police, yet wandering around who knows where. Taking a cue from you, Robert retorted. "You were the first to go wandering." "Well, I'm a different case," his daughter dismissed. "I'm only 15, it's a young thing to do. But you, it's time to think about retirement, not about dating women." No wonder that the news of his intention to remarry was a real shock for Helen. "And you'll bring that witch home," she screamed. "Have you completely lost your mind? Just try to do it, and I. Unable to come up with a worthy revenge, Helen pushed her spoon aside and jumped out from behind the table. Robert sighed heavily. This was exactly what he had feared. Helen had enough patience and malice to ruin his newfound happiness. She didn't attend the wedding, and later, when Amanda moved into their apartment, she barely communicated with her, audibly snorting and turning away whenever the woman tried to talk to her. Robert got tired of apologizing for his daughter's behavior, but his wife reassured him. "Don't worry, I understand everything. It's not easy for a girl to accept my presence. I'm not offended, everything will work out." However, Robert had little faith in that. In his eyes, everything was only getting worse. Helen started dating boys, and when she learned that Amanda was pregnant, she declared, "Well, let today be the evening of good news. Then I'll please you too. Stephen and I are dating, and we plan to get married when I turn 18. "With whom, Stephen?" Robert asked in shock. "I hope not that idiot from the third floor who—" "Exactly him," the satisfied daughter confirmed. "He still rides a motorcycle so fast that all the grandmas on benches fall over. A cool guy, isn't he?" She left the table, and Robert helplessly looked at his wife. "Stephen," he explained, "is that juvenile psychopath who makes the entire neighborhood quake when he comes home at 1 in the morning." Amanda covered his hand with hers. "Everything will be fine," she said calmly, although there was no particular confidence in the woman's voice. It seemed she herself was already tired of all this misunderstanding from Helen. However, they didn't have to suffer for long. Helen soon relieved them of her presence, running away with that boy in an unknown direction. Outraged, Robert went to Stephen's parents, but they just shrugged. "What can I do?" the boy's father said. "It's young love, they'll come back on their own." Robert barely managed to restrain himself from hitting the chubby man. Stephen's father turned out to be right. His son did return after a week. But only him, without Helen. "Where's my daughter?" Robert demanded. Having come to his home, he grabbed the boy by the chest. "Helen, right? Who knows? She freaked out 3 days ago and went off who knows where, right on the highway. And what, am I supposed to beg her to stay? I have my pride too." Robert could have said a lot to this man. About who he was and how to deal with people like him. However, at that moment, his daughter's fate was more important, so he sighed and ordered. "Now you will tell me everything in detail. Where were you? Which way did Helen go? Everything you remember." Otherwise, do you realize what I can do to you? I do, the guy grumbled. Idiot. Why did I get involved with your Helen? There were plenty of normal girls. The information obtained from Stephen was so scarce that Robert wanted to scream in frustration. Where did she go? Why? For what reason? All of it was a secret shrouded in darkness. Helen was declared missing, but it didn't lead to anything. A year passed. The couple had a son, Mark, and peace reigned in the family. Helen, the main disturber of peace, was no longer around, and Robert's soul constantly ached from it. She'd better continue her antics, the disappointed father thought. She would torment us with Amanda, but she would be nearby. Hope that the girl would be found alive was fading with each passing day. There was no news of her. Helen vanished into thin air. And now, on a completely ordinary work evening, Robert saw a familiar pendant, a golden flower that he had once given to Karen and later passed on to Helen in memory of her mother, hanging around Somebody's neck, who irritated him and caused a strong dislike from the first glance. Admit it, where did you get it? Robert ordered her. And don't even think about resisting. If you lie, I'll make your life fun, remember my words. The arrogant smile disappeared from Betty's face, replaced by fear. Okay, I'll tell you, she muttered. I took this pendant from a girl who was too cheeky and sharp-tongued. She lives there. Where? Robert asked again. And now, let's hear more details. In what den? Robert listened to the girl, and his hair stood on end. He had never heard of such a den in the city. And to think that Helen ended up there. Of course, Robert immediately became active, demanding to go there with an inspection. He even thought about going there alone, come what may. Fortunately, the higher-ups decided to organize a raid. Robert simultaneously prayed to find Helen there and feared discovering his daughter in such a place. This time he was more anxious than his young partner David. The usual scene, screaming and frightened girls, shocked clients, it no longer bothered him. Among the many faces, Robert was looking for only one, the face of his daughter. Dad? He would recognize those frightened eyes out of thousands, but he hesitated, hearing the unfamiliar address. How long had it been since Helen called him that? Chaos reigned around them, and Robert and his daughter stood, embracing, paying no attention to anything. Modest David threw a blanket over her shoulders and went on, giving orders and taking control of the operation. Later, they would have a long conversation. Helen's voice was hoarse from sobbing, her eyes were red, but she continued telling her story, looking into her father's face. When I quarreled with Stephen, walked alone along the road for a long time, she said. Decided to go back home. You and Nancy are kind, you wouldn't kick me out, right? Although, at that moment, I hated you, I'll be honest. I was stupid. Her voice broke. Robert's throat tightened too, but he tried to remain calm. Go on, he nodded. It's all in the past. Amanda and I forgave you a long time ago, and we bear no grudges. But I can't forgive myself, Helen said. She sighed and continued, so, there I was. I left Stephen, cars were passing by. I decided to get into one of them, thinking they would give me a ride to the city. But there were some creeps inside. They sprayed something in my face, and I blacked out. Woke up in that place, where you found me. They called it a hotel. I spent a whole year there, a year that felt like an eternity. Dad, they made me. Forgive me. Helen's voice broke. Robert put his hand on her shoulder. You don't have to tell me everything. You are still my daughter. I love you, everything else doesn't matter. David, the robust guy, entered the room almost on tiptoes, and placed 2 cups of tea in front of them. Helen smiled through her tears. "Thank you." "Don't mention it," the guy replied. "It's no trouble for me." He left the room, and the girl looked attentively at Robert. "And still, I was right. Remember, many years ago, at the zoo?" "Right about what?" Robert didn't understand. "You have the keys to all the cages. You pulled a fool like me out of the dungeon." "Thank you, Dad." Later, there was a similar conversation with Amanda. The woman was deeply moved hearing so many warm words from her stepdaughter. And Helen picked up Mark, placing him against her chest. "So, you're my little brother? Well, hello. Shall we be friends?" Of course, Helen didn't recover immediately. For many months, she visited a psychologist, tried to get used to a normal life. David played a significant role in her recovery. He sympathized with the girl and continued to visit her. They got married later. In the end, Helen managed to find her happiness. If she thought about the tragedy that happened to her, she regarded it as a difficult path that led her to true love.